David French, senior editor for The Dispatch and host of the Good Faith podcast. David, what would you add here about media coverage of what appears to be an impending rollback of abortion rights, at least in many states in the U.S.? What do you want people to keep in mind about how this should be covered in the months ahead?
Yeah, I think how it should be covered is informing people first and foremost, because one of the things that we see is that, as was just mentioned, folks don't even know what it means when you say, should Roe v. Wade be overturned? Right. So that, for example, is a virtually useless poll question, because they often interpret it as, should abortion be banned or not banned, which is not what Roe v. Wade is about. It's whether or not, it's who decides. Is it decided by justices of the Supreme Court, or is it decided by voters, either through Congress or through their state legislatures? So there's just an enormous amount of work that has to be done to educate people about what the issues are. And I think also the media needs some education as well. I think the media class is much more intensely focused on this issue than a lot of the rest of Americans, because you're seeing in the polling some rather interesting things that seem to be not really tracking with each other. So, for example, there was a CNN poll that indicated strong American support for at least some degree of abortion rights, but also strong American support for the GOP in the midterm elections. And the GOP is, is the party that is the pro-life party, Democrats' pro-choice party. And so how can that be if there's strong support for abortion rights amongst Americans and they're going to vote Republican? That tells us a lot about relative intensity. How much do people care about this issue? And I think sometimes the media, because it's so glued to Twitter, often misses the fact that abortion is really downstream from a lot of people's lives in the United States of America. We're part of this American class that's super focused on this issue, and an awful lot of Americans are not.
I agree with that, and I think many people don't want to think about it until they're confronted by it when it's national news. There's a lot more here, so let's everybody stick around, take a quick break here. And this just into CNN, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has become the latest head of state to visit Ukraine. His office now confirming that he's there to meet with Ukraine's president. Further details to come. The U.S. First Lady Jill Biden also traveled to the country earlier today and met with the Ukrainian First Lady. We'll have more on this later in the day here on CNN. We have to talk about the leaks this week, including reporting from the New York Times claiming that U.S. intelligence has been helping Ukraine kill Russian generals. The White House pushed back on that framing, calling the headline misleading, saying the story was irresponsible. There's also been leaks from the intel community, it seems, about the U.S. providing intelligence that helped Ukraine target Russia's prized warship, the Moskva. NBC reported the president called his top U.S. intel and defense officials and urged them to plug the leaks. New York Times columnist Tom Friedman reporting, quote, I'm told that he called the director of national intelligence, director of the CIA, and the secretary of defense to make clear in the strongest language that this kind of loose talk is reckless and has got to stop immediately. I'm told the same by a White House source, that the president was livid about these leaks. Joining me now, senior editor for The Dispatch, contributing writer for The Atlantic, David French. David, are news outlets right or wrong to publish the information they are told by these anonymous U.S. officials?
Yeah, I think this fits within a news outlet's fundamental news gathering function. Look, there are circumstances in which I think an administration can go to a news outlet and say, this is an absolute matter of life and death, establish it's a matter of life and death or the near equivalent, and a news outlet can responsibly say no. But what we're talking about here is the conduct of a nation and the conduct of our intelligence agencies. And one of the most important stories, the most important, arguably, story in the world right now. And I think what's important here is that I'm seriously doubtful that this is news to the Russians. If you're talking about the ability of Ukrainians to uncannily target key targets, Russian military targets, that is something that logic suggests is sort of outside of the capability of the Ukrainian military acting alone. I do think the main problem, as a practical matter with the leak, is the sense that the administration or administration officials are bragging about it, that that's something that they're trying to sort of throw into Russia's face, what they are doing, or take political credit or credit in the court of public opinion for their actions in the war. And I think that's where it gets a bit more dangerous, because what's happening is they're essentially dunking on the Russians in public, so to speak. But as far as would Russia have any idea that we were doing this before the leak? I think that's just fiction.
I see. So these are anonymous leaks. We're also getting on-the-record confirmation about some chaos from the Trump years, thanks to Mark Esper's upcoming book. Let's take a look at this. His book comes out on Tuesday. He was, of course, the former Secretary of Defense. And in the book, there's a lot in the book. One of the revelations is that Esper claims then President Trump asked him in 2020 about launching missiles into Mexico to destroy the drug labs and kill cartels. Maybe Trump thought he could do it and Mexico wouldn't know, and Esper had to talk him down. But here we are, David, yet another incredible revelation from the Trump years, this time on the record from the former Secretary of Defense. And he had to sue to get his book to be published because there's this Pentagon pre-publication process where his book was held up. And according to CNN's Oliver Darcy, this is what held it up. They didn't want this drug lab detail to come out. So he sued. Now the book is coming out. Tell us about that process, though, that the Defense Department had to review his book first. Is it possible they were trying to stop embarrassing news about Trump from getting out?
Well, that's not the intent of the review process, although sometimes that's the effect of the review process or the way that the review process is distorted. The intent is pretty obvious and makes sense, in that if you're a person who is exposed to an avalanche of secret information, there need to be steps taken in classified information. There need to be steps taken to make sure that classified information doesn't enter the public domain. But it is not a process that is supposed to be protective of the president's political reputation or save a president from embarrassment. Embarrassing moments aren't classified because they're embarrassing. And so I think that oftentimes when you do have a pre-publication review process, one that's sensibly designed to prevent a leaking of classified information that could damage national security, it can often morph into something else, a process designed to prevent embarrassment.
I see. Well, the book is out Tuesday. We're going to see it for ourselves. David French, thanks so much.